All right, we're about 2 minutes past the hour. I think I'm going to go ahead and get us officially started. Welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the April installment of our 2025 AAAS IUSE virtual workshop series. My name is Drew Scammell. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm a program associate in the Center for STEM Education and Workforce, or CSU, at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. On behalf of our AAAS IUSE initiative, I'd like to welcome you to today's virtual workshop, Empowering STEM Students Both in and Beyond the Classroom. Today's workshop will feature presentations from Margaret Ellis and Dr. Krishna Pakala. And before we jump in, I have a few housekeeping notes I'd like to go over with y'all. Nothing major, but this presentation is being recorded, and the recording and the speaker slides will be available in the coming weeks on our website at AAAS-iuse.org. And in fact, the speaker slides are already available in case you want to follow along with your own copy. And you can find that at the workshop's webpage. You'll also receive an email with the link to the archive when it's available. And please note, we'll transition to some breakout rooms following the presentations for y'all to have additional conversation and discussion with one of our speakers, and these breakout rooms will not be recorded. We also have closed captioning available through Zoom. You can download and view the full transcript by clicking the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And for those of you who are new to the AAAS IUSE initiative, we seek to support faculty, students, and the greater undergraduate STEM education community by disseminating research and knowledge about STEM teaching, learning, equity, and institutional transformation. We invite you to learn more about the AAAS IUSE initiative on our website, and we hope you'll join our community as future contributors. You can also follow us on X, formerly Twitter, at IUSE Program, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on our latest events, blogs, or to share what you learned at today's workshop. And that's all I have from me, so we'll shift over to our first presentation of the day. I'd like to welcome Margaret Ellis, Associate Professor of Practice at Virginia Tech. Margaret, I'll go ahead, pull down our slides and hand it over to you.
See, I'll pull things up here. All right. Everybody see the slides and hear me okay?
Yep, looks good to me.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm an associate professor of practice here at Virginia Tech, and I'm in the computer science department. This work that I'm going to present to you today, I have been working on in collaboration with colleagues from educational psychology, Brett and Hande, and then also in stats in Young, all from Virginia Tech. So the project that I'd like to share with you is focused specifically on training computer science teaching assistants to motivate students, but I hope that the ideas and the lessons that we've learned can help you across whichever fields you're interested in. To give you some context, here at Virginia Tech in the Department of Computer Science, our undergraduate courses can be anywhere from 50 to 700 students, and they might have multiple sections. Some computer science courses have lab sections. We often have multiple instructors and teams of TAs. So in our department, the undergraduate and graduate TAs together is pushing 300 students, to give some context. Brett Jones and I have been working together for years about the motivation of students in our CS courses. And in the past 2 years, we've been working specifically on this program for TAs to help create an improved motivational climate in our courses. And our approach has involved a pre-semester workshop, and then 4 weeks into the semester, we have the TAs do a self-assessment. And then at the middle of the semester, we have a follow-up workshop. And at that point, we provide feedback to the TAs. For the bigger picture of our project, we spent the fall of 2023, designing our program. And then in spring 2024, we piloted it with a course that I lead that had about 20 TAs. And then the next semester, we went ahead with 4 courses that are core to our curriculum. They're all have hundreds of students and teams of TAs and multiple instructors, about 60 to 80 range number of TAs just in those 4 courses. And then now we are wrapping up this phase of our project and figuring out next steps. So as we mentioned, here are our intervention kind of stages throughout the semester. This is something interesting we can probably discuss amongst the group. Sometimes people want to have weekly meetings with the TAs, or how do you get them to show up and when and where, and coordinating all of that. So we chose this approach, a pre-semester 7-hour workshop, which includes lunch, and then the check-in 4 weeks later, and then the mid-semester workshop, and then the feedback. So our guiding framework is the music model of motivation, and it has these 5 elements where you can think of it like an acronym. So the M for music aligns with empowerment, and that's making sure students feel empowered and have autonomy over some aspects of their learning. Now, we focus on this in the course experience, and then we do study and look at how this affects their more generalized feelings about CS, or careers in CS, or STEM, or careers in STEM. And then the U is for usefulness. We want the students to understand why the instruction is useful for their goals in life. We want the students to believe they can succeed if they put forth the effort. We want to see that students are interested in the content and the instructional activities. And then the 5th component here is that students believe that others in the learning environment care about their learning and about them as a person. So we decided, based on the data that we had collected, to focus on 3 of these 5 components. We addressed them all, but especially in the pre-semester workshop, we focus on ways to help TAs ensure that students feel empowered, that they can succeed, and that the other people in the learning environment care about them. So here's our pilot group. And we had the 3 big ideas are based around what I just mentioned about empowerment, success, and caring. So helping the TAs understand about teaching effectiveness with empowerment here. And our first big idea around that is how the TAs can empower the students. And we get into this explicitly with them, which I'll give you a few highlights along the way, that TAs know to listen to students and ask questions to them, and also help the students with their metacognition and how to self-regulate their learning. The TAs can be great role models for that and do a lot of modeling. Also, how can the TAs provide feedback to the students that is effective and supportive? So some of the approaches that we used, and I'll just highlight a few to give you some ideas, are scaffolding, rubber ducking, active listening, mirroring, and self-regulation. So those are effective teaching strategies in our context with these TAs, where some of them are leading labs, but a lot of them are having one-on-one time in office hours with students. They also do provide grading, and they also answer questions on the forum. So this is we have several variations of this image that we go over with the TAs. So I thought this was a good one to share with you all. The zone of proximal development right here, where the student can accomplish the task only with assistance. So pointing this out to the TAs can be a aha moment for them. We find that maybe 1 or 2 of them out of our group has even had a psychology class. So a lot of the things that we are exposing them to, they're familiar with from being students or from having experience as a TA, but they have never put words or had these kinds of conversations about learning in our experience thus far. So we point this out to them, and this idea that we don't want them to give the answers to the students. And this is important, right, for empowering the students and effective teaching, and can be a novel idea for both undergraduate and graduate TAs. So we talk about scaffolding and all the different ways that we can scaffold in our classes. But for them in particular, when they're having that interaction, we also coach them on using something called rubber ducking. And this is a common term that's used somewhat in jest, but is real in computer science, where we say, if you're a programmer and you're stuck, then you have this rubber duck on your desk and you explain the problem to them. And by talking about it out loud, you figure it out yourself. And so we explain this idea to the TAs, and most of them are like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then so we use that language with the TAs, and then the TAs can use it with the students. And we just make it part of the conversation. And many people, that's familiar to them, because you can say, when you had a question and then you wrote it out in the email and then suddenly you answered your own question. This is what we want to help our students do that. We don't want them to be too reliant on you. We know it might feel good to be the hero, but we want you to empower them. And this is one of the ways you can do it. So throughout our workshop, we have several scenarios. We worked on these scenarios in conjunction with TAs that I've been working with over the years. And so in our context, they are computer science specific. So people could make variations of them that would be something their TAs could connect to, because if we say like null pointer exception or array index out of bounds or something like that to a group of computer science TAs, they're like, oh yeah, it hooks them in because they're very familiar with that. We have these scenarios, and a lot of times what we do variations of how we deliver during the workshops, but we'll have often two TAs go up and model, and then we'll have versions of the scenarios. So you can see here where we might start out. The student says, I'm having trouble getting this code to run. Can you help me with it? And we might go through various versions of the scenarios of how the TA might respond and how things might possibly unfold. And usually enough of us have had enough experience that it's like, oh yeah, that's happened to me. My tutoring session has gone off the rails, or that's happened to me. It's been a great success. So going back to the rubber ducking and the zone of proximal development and the assistance and empowering the students, we point all of this out to the students and say, the TAs, and say, if we worked through this scenario and we modeled it, and then we'd show this scenario and we'd ask them in their groups, like, where does the active listening happen? Where does the mirroring happen? And, we try to model good teaching. So in our workshop, we're not just talking at them. They have a bunch of activities and practice. So we let them know it's important that they are actually listening to the students, and then they let the students know that they're listening to them and working with them towards a solution to guide them there. Being explicit like this with the TAs seems to be very helpful. So the first big idea was the empowering students with effective teaching strategies. And then our second big idea here is how effective TAs help students believe that they can succeed if they put forth the effort. So then thinking about, all right, how can TAs increase student self-efficacy, and how can they help students foster a growth mindset? And some of the things that we go over in our workshop, we'll just give some highlights here, are success feedback, understanding self-efficacy, and growth mindset. And one of the things that we do with them is try to be very practical. So here's some examples of some quotes we give to them to go back to the scaffolding that we were talking about earlier, and then also for success beliefs, and give them a lot of examples, and then also practice and opportunities to say these things, which if you're 19 might feel awkward at first, but if they actually do it and then understand why it matters that you ask the students questions, you help them self-regulate and think about their metacognition and go through the process with you and figure it out themselves, that's why it's important to do it. And then also with their success beliefs, especially, for example, here, saying things like, I had a hard time with this when I was taking the class, but I eventually got it. So having that role model who can encourage you and also say, hey, I was just recently in your shoes and I had challenges and I overcame them. That can really help build the students' self-efficacy. We also had some videos that we share with them. They're from the Microsoft Imagine program, and they were created by CS folks at Mount Holyoke. If anybody is interested in those, they are wonderful. Most of them are CS specific, but they might give you good ideas if you're not in CS for topics or scenarios to address with your TAs, or quite frankly, all of these concepts, I think, are great for all of us and instructors and faculty in general, because we have such a large volume of students and so many TAs. We felt that addressing these concepts with the TAs was sort of our best way to have impact across a large amount of students. So we do get into self-efficacy pretty deeply with okay, that's a strong point, but compared to the other topics, I feel like we spend more time on self-efficacy than the other topics throughout the kind of workshop, because I think that it's very important for our students, and we see variation in self-efficacy of the students in our courses, and it's something that the TAs can really grab onto in a place that they can understand and relate and use the phrasing and make a difference. So we let them know, about the 4 tenets of self-efficacy to help promote students' success beliefs, recognizing the student's firsthand successes, reminding them of those, sharing their own successes, like the example I just gave, verbal persuasion, encouraging the students, and then emotions. And helping the students reduce their anxiety and manage their emotions, especially when they're up against a deadline with an intense programming project, is something really important in our field. And giving the TAs some tools to help students in those situations is really important. And also even just that we talk about it, that yes, this happens. We see this, we see students that are very upset, and what do we do about it? Again, we bring up some scenarios. So here's one that after we do some versions with, then we would say, okay, where are we promoting success beliefs in here? And they go in their groups and they talk about it. And then we'd put this slide up and say, here's places that we are promoting the students' success beliefs, so that the TAs have a reason to use these phrases. So again, pointing out other successes. Other students often ask about that, but then they eventually get it. Or helping the students manage their emotions, letting them know that you're going to be there to help them. And again, firsthand successes, if you can get to know the student or the material, say, hey, you've been successful before, or you got to this point, you're going to carry on. And that means even more from the TAs, from the peers, than the instructors, I think, because they're closer to the students. So our third big idea here is how effective TAs can show students that they care about them and that they belong in the discipline. So how they give feedback can really matter, and also having TAs be aware of their own unconscious biases and stereotypes. So in the caring component of our workshop, we address caring feedback, belonging, stereotypes, and microaggressions. One of the things you see here is from our pilot. The data that we collected gave this indication, and so we try to be really explicit with the TAs about what we have found, even that's in research in general, but even specifically in our department, so they realize, why are we even talking about this? Does this even matter? So what we found is that when students believe that CSTAs care about their learning, they are more likely to feel they belong in the CS department, be interested in CS, and see themselves as a CS person. And we do have TAs with a variety of backgrounds, and some may be like very comfortable with this conversation, and it might be very familiar. And we have some who think that doesn't matter, belonging, it's really just about the coding, and why would the culture, or why do I need to say these nice things to the students? And so hopefully this time together kind of helps enlighten them. Likewise with the grading. So just as an example, we might give them a variety of different ways to give feedback on a project or a program, or we also talk about how to respond on the forum. We give them these two examples that are pretty similar, but the second one is more caring and more supportive. It gives some positive reinforcement. It gives a reminder. It doesn't start with the word you, which might put a student on their heels. Some of these subtle things that those of us with more experience might just know automatically is really helpful for these undergraduate and graduate TAs to become aware of. So these are our three big ideas, just to lay it out for you. Hopefully this is helpful. This is what we did in our pre-semester workshop. When we get about 4 weeks in, we figure at that point they're starting to settle into their position. Now, some of these TAs have previous experience and some of them are brand new. So if they have not been a TA before, they get all these experiences at the workshop, but they haven't really put them into practice. So at this point, they should have their schedule. They got the ropes of their position, and then we ask them to do a self-assessment. So that goes through all kinds of operational things, just helping them make sure they're staying on track, they're showing up on time, but then also about these big ideas that we talked about. For example, you'll see up here, having them reflect on what they do to build students' success beliefs. And uh, they can look through all of these. These are things that we had covered in the workshop. I haven't talked about them all here yet, but it gives you an idea of all of the different things that we do cover with them. So just to increase their awareness. Now we do collect these, but we don't try to use it to evaluate the TAs. What we do is look at them and see what we might need to make sure we cover at the mid-semester workshop. So we have a 2-hour mid-semester workshop in the evening. We have both the pre-semester and the mid-semester. We broke those into 2 groups so that there was only about 40 people or 35 people in the room. At this point, all the TAs have had some experience, and so we focus a lot on scenarios at this point. We have them working in groups, usually just about 3, and we mix them up. We also try to make sure we have some experienced and some new TAs together, or TAs from different courses that haven't met each other before or have had different experiences they can share. And we work through these scenarios where they discuss how they would handle it. We have them share out some, but in the interest of time, a lot of times the facilitators walk around and discuss with the TAs, and then we give some tips and guided pointers afterwards. We find that the TAs are very engaged in this. And so if we had open conversation, we could probably stay for 4 hours instead of 2. But it's a good jump start. And so here to give you just some examples of the scenarios. So the needy student comes for help with the project. They seem confused about fundamentals. You give them some tips, and they are sitting right next to you and keep turning their computer towards you and asking you what to do. This continues for over 10 minutes. So what do you do? And the TAs can have usually a very hearty discussion about this because it is familiar. They're like, oh, I have a student like that, or oh, there's this one student and then they can share their ideas, and then we can chime in, and then we can also remind them, we want to empower the students. We want to encourage their success beliefs. So we want them to feel cared for. But we need to think about how we talk to and support the students. And I'm sure a lot of you are thinking through many strategies that you can use here. We can talk about those more. Or maybe we have an unconfident student who would say something to us like, I'm just not a good coder. And how can a TA respond and support that student? Then we have our mid-semester feedback for the TAs. We did collect survey data from the students and also from the faculties for the classes that the TAs worked in, and then we provided that to the TAs. We did not give them the raw data in the middle of the semester from the students, like with quotes. We aggregated it, and that's kind of an interesting area of work to think about. What's the right level of feedback to provide the TAs. So we also got feedback from the TAs about the workshops. So asking if the workshops were useful, if it helped them feel ready, and if the workshop was enjoyable. So pretty positive. I think this is interesting here about what was useful to them. So hearing about the caring and belonging. Now you'll see here in the blue, this is the spring semester. This is the smaller group, and this group was more engaged, and I worked with them also. So I think that can help see that there's a slight difference here. But in general, the scaffolding and the self-efficacy and interacting with students, they found those useful. And they also they found the explanations from the instructors useful and the scenarios useful. They found everything useful to a certain extent. Where we got information from the students is you can see the controls here for whether the TAs are effective, whether the TAs help me believe I can succeed, and whether the TAs care about me. So from the control, we did see an increase to the next semesters where we had the TA training in these specific courses. And it was statistically significant both semesters for the TAs helping me believe I can succeed. And then for the fall semester across the 4 courses for the increase in the students feeling that the TAs care about them. Here's some information about the grades. There's a lot of factors that go into grades, so I don't think we can make any specific conclusions there. And then we also care about the TA's experience, whether that's undergrad or graduate TAs. They're also our students, so we are also, developing them, and we want to encourage them. And looking at their experience, the one place where we saw a significant change for the TAs that participated and were in the training is the effect on their belonging in CS. So we were happy to see that. We got a sense of that because spending the time together really builds community. We have a project website that we're happy for you to take a look at and ask us questions about. And then I've also shared a news story that Virginia Tech did about the project, so you can actually see some of our students and TAs in their office hours and in classes. Maybe that'll help kind of solidify your vision about what we've done and maybe what you can do at your institution. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to speaking with some of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margaret. We're now going to hand it over to our next speaker, Dr. Krishna Pakala, Associate Professor and Interim Associate Dean in Residence at Boise State University. So Dr. Pakala, over to you.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, how is it looking, Drew?
Looks great to me.
Okay, and then could you also put the workbook in the chat so that they have it opened?
Yep, colleague Thomas just dropped it in there for y'all.
Okay, perfect. All right, folks, it's going to be a whirlwind, but let's do this. So I'm going to talk about stories and how they can be impactful for not only our students, but everybody else. And there has been never a more important time than the times we live in, where it is very, very critical that we find ways to reflect and, can empower people. So this program that I'm going to talk about comes from Story Collider, which is a national nonprofit where I currently serve as the board of directors. And I have shared stories with them. They have a podcast. There are about 12 million podcast downloads that happen. So really awesome place for you to get some podcast going. And then we also do a lot of workshops as an organization, and also I'll talk about through our grants. We have been doing workshops in our classes and also some conferences. What it all does is, most importantly, builds community. These are some images of a show that we have, or when we do a workshop, eventually people who have not had much of interaction with each other tend to gravitate towards each other based on what gets shared and some of the activities that happen in the workshops that we do. So it all started with us thinking about, the storytelling has a ripple effect, not only on the storyteller, but it can have an impact on other students' identity and belonging. But most importantly, it can also have an impact on the society's stereotypes of engineers, especially who belongs to engineering or STEM in particular. So we are actually coming to the end of our 3-year project, which was funded by NSF, which is majority of this work that I'm sharing today. So what I thought today is, instead of giving you more data and stuff, it'll come out in papers, they're in preprint right now. I want you to experience what a workshop could look like really fast, okay? So in a class, we do this workshop where, we have a lot of team activities, and some of the things that you'd experience, they'll experience in one class period, like a 75-minute class period. And then they have time to work on a couple of assignments to draft a personal story that they submit, and we review them and provide some feedback, and they refine it. And then eventually some of them get to share that on stage. In fact, yesterday night, we had an amazing show where we had 6 different storytellers shared their personal stories from the electrical engineering program. Just at a high level, what it helps, these are some selective qualitative findings. People have said during the interviews that this helps them persevere in the program. And then most importantly, helping them connect to their major, and also identify that this is a career, that they can see multiple things that can also help. And also the science communication is something that maybe not emphasized enough in engineering, but with these activities, students see the value in those. So why stories? Why do we need them? Because narratives in reality are more interesting, more understandable, more believable, and more persuasive. It has a very powerful impact on people, as you can transport them to that space and time when you share that story. Some high level, quantitative stuff that I wanted to also share from a subset of our data, which shows that after the storytelling intervention, we have had significant shifts in how students perceive, how they identify as engineers, and it is more apparent for our women and historically excluded students from STEM. Okay, so hopefully that drives the point that this is something that is helpful. So with that, what I thought I'll do is I'll share a story. This is a true personal story of mine, and go to page 0 of your workbook, which says Cognitive Organizer. As I share my story, think about how I show up as a character, plot, how science shows up, what scene it is, what is a conflict, what is a tension, okay? Again, you don't have to fill up everything. I just want you to get going. All right, are we ready? Margaret, ready? Okay. So it is a perfect spring morning in Boise. It was Bronco Day, which means we open up the campus to prospective students, and there is a spring football game as well. The marching band was warming up. The prospective students were buzzed with excitement, and the blue turf that we have was glowing in the sun, ready for that big day. The whole campus felt alive. At that time, I was serving as a faculty in residence in the Living Learning program, where I was living on campus. And that morning was like any other. I had just stepped out of my shower, steam still hanging in the air, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. I read the email. My stomach dropped. You see, I had been in tenure track negotiations for months, carefully navigating every conversation, making sure I followed the right process. This tenure track position meant upward mobility for me, my family, potential pathway to permanent residency in this country, and most importantly, job security. But this email, I hear that you're communicating directly with the dean on this situation and not including me. As a result, I'm putting the entire transition process on hold. Wait, what? It was a gut punch to me. My entire career, the job I had worked for years, was suddenly on pause over a misunderstanding. I had never gone behind my chair's back, yet here I was accused of doing exactly that. I could feel it in my body, tension in my shoulders, my breath suddenly shallow. I reread the email again, again. Maybe I misread it. No, it was real. At that moment, my wife saw the shift in my face, the weight in my posture. She had been planning to take our newborn to India at that time to introduce her to our family. She looked at me and said, "Cancel the tickets, I'm staying." I told her to go, but she refused. She said, "You need the support now." And in that moment, I felt her immense love and care for me. And this was a sacrifice she made I'll never forget in my life. So we canceled the trip. Over the next few days, I did everything I could do to fix the misunderstanding. I sent emails, no response. I requested a meeting, completely avoided. I even walked to my chair's office, hoping for a simple conversation. Instead, I was met with silence, a stare full of frustration. I had never felt so powerless in my career. I had done everything right, followed every step, every protocol, yet my future was suddenly in jeopardy over a misunderstanding I couldn't control. I had hoped my chair would be a mentor, guiding me through this transition with fairness, but instead I was met with silence and uncertainty. Finally, after multiple attempts, we met. I defended myself, clarified, reassured. It was exhausting, disheartening, proving my integrity when I had done nothing wrong. This was supposed to be the moment where I have felt seen, validated, secure in my future. Instead, I signed my tenure track offer in my colleague's office, another person who has been an incredible mentor and coach to me, a moment that should have been a celebration. But I felt nothing, no excitement, no relief, just exhaustion and disappointment. I thought back to my wife canceling the trip, not because she had to, but because she saw the weight I was carrying. I had been carrying that same weight throughout this entire process alone. Looking back, it wasn't the courage in the traditional sense. It was a choice I had to make every day. I kept moving forward because of the people who believed in me, my wife, my colleagues, my students, who reminded me why the work we do matter, and especially what I did mattered, even when I doubted myself. And some days moving forward was a simple one as sending one email, teaching one class, having one conversation. It was about not about feeling strong. It was about refusing to let one hard moment define my entire journey. So I never wanted to be the reason someone else felt that way. So when I see a student struggling to advocate for themselves, I don't just offer advice. I make space for them. I listen. Or when a colleague who faces career uncertainty, especially these days, instead of staying silent, like others had done to me, I speak up because I know what it feels like to stand on the edge of something, waiting for permission to move forward. And I know how much it matters when just one person steps in, not to hold you back, but to push you forward. Thank you. So, hopefully you got a gist of the character plot, and we can have a more discussion at our discussion later. So hopefully you saw it was personal. There were elements of science, even though I didn't share anything about mechanical engineering, anything, the fact that I am a mechanical engineering faculty means that I am science, right? So I'm talking about, a matter. So let's get into some of the literature, which some of this is actually based in. Uh, Susan Fisk and Dupree have this study which which they did, where they looked at people's motives being misunderstood. For example, to gain research money or sell something, contradict the Bible, for example, you're maybe sometimes distrusted based on how you share. So what they looked at is trust and credibility across different professions. And they kind of classified them into two components, like think of these as qualities of those whom you either most trust and respect, and then competent means somebody you think are capable. And then what they found is they identified 4 different quadrants here, where, as you can see, if you're high on warmth, high on competence, you'll have admiration towards them. If they're, low on warmth and the other direction, disgust, you'll have that sense for them. So you get the idea. So competent and cold is envy. Incompetent and warm, you feel a sense of pity. Most of teachers and nurses fall in the admiration factor, and lawyers and scientists generally fall in the envy quadrant. So now getting to the elements of the workshop which we do with our students, and you will see that kind of show up as you reflect on what I shared in my story. So at Story Collider, we like to think about 3 elements when we think about personal stories. So believable characters who experience meaningful events and the outcomes of those events. So in this case, the character was me, event, that one email I got that day, and outcome, as the stakes were whether I would make this transition to tenure track. So we like to start our workshops with events, something which is really meaningful to you, as a time that you had a situation and you try to come up with your story around that. So this is where our cow on the fence moment comes. So here are 2 amazing animals who somehow one of them ended up on this fence. Okay. So this is the event, right? So this is some time this happened, and what we are trying to do is understand, how did it happen? What happens next, right? So that's where that tension is. But if this event is meaningful to you, it'll be meaningful to your audience. And then what we do with our students and workshop participants is do a brainstorming activity. So if you look at page 1 of your workbook, you will see there are a bunch of prompts where we help workshop participants identify meaningful events. It could be a time you knew you were wrong. Another fun way to look at it, your first kiss, your best kiss or worst kiss, whatever it could be. And we try to have bunch of these events that people identify, and then we ask them to pick one and share with a partner, and then the participants then work on that event throughout the duration of the workshop as they build their story. And I provide some ideas here how we do it. I'm happy to do this workshop at your institutions, virtual, in person, whatever, but I just want to give a feel for what it looks like. And then when people are sharing about these events, what we use an approach is curiosity and confusion, where people are more curious about why what happened that event, and then if there are any details that they need, they pose the questions as if they have some confusions. So the next element we are going to look at, we looked at events, now the outcomes, because it is very important why the event was meaningful, because it will have, say, consequences. So again, to remind you, believable characters who experience meaningful events and the outcomes of these events. So let's go with outcomes. So we again go back to this cow on the fence, right? So let's see what you might be interested, what happens next, right? Because we don't know what happens next. There are a bunch of possibilities that could happen, right? because the outcomes, you can think of it as stakes. You know, why did it matter for Bessie that she got stuck on that fence, you know, at the cow? I'm calling it Bessie. So there are a bunch of options that Bessie might have made it up on greener pastures, right? Or something bad happened to Bessie, or she went into bovine bliss where she's in a new world. So there are different possibilities, right? So when you select the event, you know, when it matters to you so much, then you will find a way to describe it to the audience. And that's where the outcomes and the character that we also will talk about in a minute will help you understand it. Another place where we help people understand what is at stake or what are the outcomes at play is page 2 of your workbook, where we just ask them to do this simple uh, couple of blanks here, right? We say, at the time of my event, I wanted upward mobility for my family, but the damn email was in the way, right? So that is an example of, you know, what was at stake in a really short sense that you have identified in your event. Okay, so that's what we have people focus on. And then what we do is we go to almost like how my 6-year-old daughter would do. But why? What else? Tell me more, daddy, right? So you'll go ask, keep asking, but why? What else? But why? What else? Then you will see that you will discover what is the underlying interest and underlying situation that is resulting in that outcome, why they needed it that more. So that is something we do that as an activity. And then the third and the most important element of story crafting process is the characters. You know, who tells your story, right? Because these believable characters, all of us, are the most important part of our story. We define the story's trajectory. Okay, so again, we started with events, we talked about outcomes. We're going to now talk about characters. So before I talk about character, you know, I think it's helpful to understand who is science. This is an image of a bunch of cartoons or drawings that a bunch of 7th graders who, before they visited Fermi Lab, uh, were asked to, say, draw a scientist, and this is what they drew. So a lot of buttons, bald, white dudes, right? And too many buttons. And then they visited the Fermi Lab, and then this is what they drew as who belong to the science, right? So you can see a shift in the narrative and how the students finally saw. And going back to that warmth and competence scale, so when you are, I trust you to be effective, you know, or you could be that I trust you to have my best interest in mind on the other end. So the mad scientist might fall into the other quadrant, where we don't want to be. And the amazing scientist here would fall in where we would like folks us to perceive on the warmth and axis. So then we help our students look at page 3 of the workbook, where we kind of have a bunch of prompts which will guide them to discover more about the character and tell us more about the space in time and what people were thinking about them. And you'll see there are a bunch of different ways you can answer. And then the idea with this is, you know, the narrative transportation is real, and it is stepping stone for persuasion. The more transported the audience is, the likelier they are to have story consistent beliefs and favorable evaluations of protagonists. You know, so that's amazing leaders tend to be amazing storytellers, the good ones. And there is literature here, and all of these different articles that I'm showing and more, I'm providing a Zotero link at the end that you can go to the hundreds of articles there that you can look at. And then another study looked at eye blink synchronization among participants viewing a story. And transportation was when all the audience were blinking at the same time. fully absorbed in the storyteller's world and experience. So that is real too. And then what we help our students is to then build out that scene. Page 4 of your workbook that I shared helps them look at, how you have the sensation, what you can remember, right? Like I said, steam in the air, right? When I shared my story, that excitement, my tension in my shoulders, all those are the senses that it helps you position and take your audience or whoever is listening to you into that space in that moment and be with you. So, and then we have page 5 where they'll have more things that they can do. So I shared a lot of things, but at the end of the day, 80% of what you need to know about a story structure is in this one slide. So every story has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. But what makes it a story is something changes, some transformation that happens. That is what makes a story powerful. You might have had several things life was like, and then one day this, because of that, blah blah blah, and then until finally, right? There could be several different variations of, you might have a resolution, you might have an aha moment, or some sort of rising action. There are different models that you can look at. In general, if you look at any character or us in a story, we move back and forth between great fortune or ill fortune. So between successes and challenges. The only rule is that you can't just have a flat line. For example, life was amazing. This amazing thing happened and life is still amazing. That's not a story, right? And then there were a bunch of researchers who took the Gutenberg library studies, bunch of them, and then used machine learning and came up with story arcs. Okay, these might resemble many of the stories that you are familiar with. You could have a rags to riches story like Aladdin, or man in a hole like Simba and the Lion King, or Cinderella's story, right? Or Icarus, right? Like Jack in Titanic. So these are some things that they observed that they can collapse all these into that. Okay. And then we also provide in page 6 of your workbook your way to help you craft your arc. I mean, those are not prescriptive arcs. Our stories have more than one inflection points, and that's what we kind of help the students. All right, that was a rapid fire workshop that we typically do in 8 hours and 6 hours and 3 hours. Hopefully you got an idea of what happens when we bring this powerful interventions in the classroom. I think it's quite empowering for everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Pakala. And I also really identify with the cow on the fence. That is something that really hit with my brain. But now we're going to transition into some breakout sessions for Q&A and further discussions. This is a time for y'all to meet with one of our speakers and, as said, do some Q&A or additional activity, basically spend some more time with the work that both these wonderful individuals have presented. These breakout rooms are self-assigned and are organized by speakers. So I'm going to ask my colleague Thomas to go ahead and open up the breakout rooms now. You should see a pop-up on your screen allowing you to select a breakout room, and they are labeled by speaker name. If you don't see that pop-up, you can navigate to the bottom of your screen and select the breakout rooms button and click the room you'd like to enter. But if you're running an older version of Zoom and don't see the breakout room button, please post in the chat which speaker's room you'd like to enter, and we will assign you to that room on our end. We'll call you all back to the larger group about 3:25 p.m. Eastern time to give you all about 20-25 minutes for conversation, and we'll wrap it up once we're back here. Have a productive discussion and see you soon. Alrighty, ready. I see people are coming back from the breakout rooms. I was able to pop a little bit in between back and forth, see that there's some nice conversations going, but I was wondering if either of our speakers or our facilitator, Brett with Margaret, if y'all want to bring us some highlights or any insights from your conversations. Dr. Pakala, if you want to start, hand it over to you.
Sure. I think what I tried to do in 25 minutes worked because I've never done it in 25 minutes.
Congratulations. I know that's a speed run.
I think at least the folks I spoke with got the point, got the message. I think there were questions around, can we scale this? And we addressed that saying yes, because we have done that in large classrooms as well. There were questions around how can we kind of help get these stories tailored to the needs of of the time. For example, Dale talked about maybe we can empower students who take these follow-on classes, why the prerequisite class knowledge is important, why a free body diagram is still important, and maybe those students can use this narrative form to help advance that. And then what else? We also had another participant talk about this could be cool to use when we are talking about our designs in capstone projects as a way to share at a high level uh, description of their design in a story form. Yeah, so those were some high level things.
Thank you so much for sharing. Margaret, Brett, anything from y'all's breakout room you want to share?
You want to go ahead, Brett? Or...
No, go ahead if you.
Okay. Well, what we were talking about most recently was that at some universities, while engineering or some other STEM fields might have TAs or learning assistants or peer mentors, that some of the faculty said that their CS departments actually were resistant to that idea. So we had a hopefully good conversation about what the benefits are, and maybe what the worries are, and the things that you could do to present possibly concerns about academic integrity, and how, if you instill in the TAs like that you're not giving answers, you're guiding the students, which is what I think we were really trying to get at. And I was joking because I told the TAs, I said, I see on my teaching evaluations, like the students actually know. Like, I appreciate how she doesn't just give us the answer, she guides us there. Now, some of them might hate me in the moment, in the moment, they're like, why won't you just tell me? But that I thought that was an interesting conversation. And then we talked a bit about operations and like numbers of students, numbers of TAs. And we also had a good conversation about feedback. And everybody seemed to really feel like the TAs or the peer mentors, that it's very important for them to have mentorship and supervision and feedback along the way. Most of the time that occurs in an informal way, and probably when they have a supervisor who really cares, but maybe not other times. And so one of the things that we are trying to do, and I think other people are interested in, are effective ways to formalize that. And actually, we were trying to share like some of the links from our PDF. And I don't know, Drew, maybe you could help us out by posting in the chat how people could get straight to the PDF of the slides, because there's a bunch of hyperlinks in there that have our sample feedback forms, or have the videos of our TAs kind of in action with the students. Maybe it would be helpful.
Yeah, I can go ahead right now and drop it's on it exists in perpetuity on our website, but I'll drop the direct link to the slide deck, and they'll be able to access all the hyperlinks from both your presentation and Krishna's presentation in there.
Thank you.
Drop that right in. Cool. And Brett, I'll give you a chance if there's anything else you'd like to add. Hopefully that worked.
No, I think Margaret summarized it well. So
let me know if anyone tries that link. Let me know if that didn't work. I'd pop that in real quick, but yeah, that'll exist on the IUSE webpage.
Okay, great.
And this is personally a very lovely workshop for me. I was a STEM major. I was also a STEM TA in both math and physics at a very, very interdisciplinary school in upstate New York. So looking at both of your topics, the importance of storytelling and importance, but also behind TAs of peer mentoring and creating that network of support and that network of empowerment across the board, and just like feeling a collective communal energy kind of tying you both together was really, really resonated with me. So I appreciate you both sharing your work and kind of continuing that type of mentality that I think is always needed in some STEM fields and STEM environments, of course. Great. So with that, I'm just gonna pull up. I have some final closing thoughts here. Got my notes in front of me. Gonna pull up our final slides and get y'all going on your Thursday. Perfect. Before we go, I'd just like to thank our speakers and our additional facilitator, Brett, again, and the rest of the AAAS IUSE team and all of you who are able to join and participate in the workshop today. We have a survey link, which we're posting in the chat and sending via email. The survey should only take a few minutes, and we'd really appreciate your feedback as we continue to build our virtual workshop series. As I mentioned, a recording of the presentation slide decks are posted on our website, and they'll be emailed as well in the coming days. And just once again, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we hope we'll see you at our next month's workshop on Thursday, May 22nd. Sorry, I am way too early in my slide deck. Survey link, and our next one, as said, on May 22nd, it's enhancing the learning experience, implementable and adjustable learning models for educators with Dr. Martine Stanberry, Dr. Sheila Tabonley, and Dr. Cheryl Birdstaller. And with that, that's all I have for y'all. Happy Thursday, and thanks so much for joining us.